Welcome to Move the Six. I am Bucky Brooks, and once again, my man LZ, Lance Zierlein, is joining me on the Move the Six podcast. And today, Lance, I got to tell you, man, I think one of the things that we do, we got scheduled releases on the horizon, but one of the things teams love to do is they look at a team that had a tremendous amount of success, and they say, hey, we can do this, we can be next. So last year in the Super Bowl, we saw the New England Patriots kind of come from nowhere to be a team that was in the Super Bowl. And we also saw a team on the outside, the Seattle Seahawks, make their way to not only go to the Super Bowl, but to win the Super Bowl. So what I want to do today is we're going to break up the two conferences, the NFC and the AFC. And today we're going to look at the NFC, which teams that were out of the playoffs could be in the mix to make a deep postseason run this season. Good with that? You good with that? NFC?
I'm good with it.
Okay.
I'm good with it.
All right, look, let's start because I think both of us have been kind of hot on this team. How about the New York Giants? Why are you bullish on the Giants making their way back into the tournament?
So I think they first of all, it's going to be a very competitive conference, very competitive. I think Washington will be a factor. I think the Giants, the Cowboys, the Eagles, I think it's much more competitive than it was last year. I'll give you a couple reasons. Number one, it starts with John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh understands what it takes to win at a high level. He did it for a long time. And I think bringing over players like, Patrick Ricard, Isaiah Likely, who know the way that he likes, especially Ricard, who's kind of a very unique piece that fit in very nicely over there with Harbaugh and the Ravens for all those years. I believe that he's going to get the Harbaugh way locked in over there. And I don't think the roster's all that bad. The roster, for me, I like the move of Reese, Mainoa, Colton Hood in terms of the draft. But then I got to be honest with you. I wasn't that high on Jackson Dart. And me personally, in watching him last year, I thought not only did he perform better than I expected, but I saw a player who had a confidence level and a level of poise that I believe is very real. Like there's nothing that he's trying to put on a face or put on a show. He's got all that swag that we saw in college. And then at the combine, he had remember that chain? He was showing out on the field at the combine. But he got in the league and he stayed the same guy. And it was funny to watch him vibe with Cam Scatterbo because those guys really had their own little thing going together. New York is tough for a lot of quarterbacks. Not everyone is made for New York. You got to have a special kind of a confidence. And I actually think he has that. And now you plug in getting Malik Neighbors back, you plug in John Harbaugh into the mix. You got some, Tremaine Edmonds, I think, is a pretty good player that's going to help a little bit. I just think that they could be an interesting team to keep an eye on, one that could knock on the door of the playoffs this year. That's one to keep an eye on for me because number one, Harbaugh, but number two, I think Jackson Dart is maybe a little better quarterback than I gave him credit for. Maybe some others gave him credit for.
Yeah, I would say the common denominator between you look at the Giants' plight and maybe the play that we saw of the New England Patriots, second-year quarterback takes a major jump. New coaching staff, new head coach who knows exactly what he's doing. He's had success. That confidence kind of resonates throughout the building. I feel that right now with the New York Giants. John Harbaugh, 18-year coaching veteran, has been to a Super Bowl, has won a Super Bowl, has consistently had winners. I looked up the stat. He has 11 teams that he's had with at least 10 wins. So his blueprint, his formula for winning games works, and that'll be easy for the teams to buy in. And then you talked about the roster construction and how the roster certainly wasn't that far off. Defensively, man, they should be a team that plays at the top 5 level, top 10, if they're not necessarily playing to their potential. That linebacker core with 5 first-rounders. I mean, just think about that. You have 5 first-rounders in that group. Arville Reese, Tremaine Edmonds was a first-round pick when he came out. Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter. Like, you talk about blue-chip talent. Just in that group, that gives you a chance. And look, it has been said for a long time that it takes about 8 to 12 blue-chip players to compete at the highest level, to be at a championship level. Well, man, the Giants are already there just with the linebacker core and then some of the other guys that they have in the hopper. I love that. Yeah. And then the early declaration that Francis Mainoa is going to be a right guard, to me, that speaks to who John Harbaugh is and how, look, hey, man, this ain't going to be a competition. We're not going to play this game. He's going to be a right guard. This is how we're going. I love that because I think it gives Mainoa a chance to grow in that role, and it takes away all that uncertainty, the funny business that sometimes can cloud young players' minds.
I made a point this offseason on some podcasts, and I think even on the draft show when we either as path to the draft or maybe when we were analyzing each draft pick, where I'm just waiting for teams to say, you know what, we believe this tackle can be a Pro Bowl guard. We think he'll be a better guard than tackle, even though we understand tackle is typically more valuable. It's not typically, it's always more valuable than a guard. I was just waiting for for a team or more than one team to start leaning into a player who has a chance to be a special guard and maybe has some weakness as a tackle. We've actually seen it with two teams. We saw it with Caden Proctor in Miami, at least for now. He's going to be playing guard. And then they're not on our list. I know they're not on my list of teams that I'm expecting in the playoffs, but I wanted to mention that because I think Francis Manoa, to me, is just an easy plug and play fit at guard. And I think he's going to right off the bat help that running game, which is also goes hand in hand with a young quarterback. You don't want to, even when a young quarterback looks good in year one, you don't want them to step in year two feeling like they've got to take the world on their shoulders. We saw Herbert kind of have to do that and with the Chargers, and that doesn't usually work out. C.J. Stroud tried to do it with the Texans. It didn't work out. It's hard for young quarterbacks in year two without that running game because defenses go to school on young quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to take some things away from you that maybe they didn't in your rookie season. And so having a running game can really help counter that. So, getting Cam Scatterbo back is going to be important. Having Malik Neighbors there as a wide receiver one is important. Building those trenches is important too. And we know that Harbaugh with the Ravens, that was a very important part of Ravens ball is getting those trenches built.
Yeah, I mean, look, you talk about being the biggest and baddest bullies on the block. The New York Giants certainly look like that. I've said this time and time again. Jerry Reese told me what George Young, longtime general manager for the Giants, talked about. Like, when you're the Giants, we have to have Giants. We have to play to our name. We got to play to our moniker. And they certainly are a big physical team that they're putting together. And I just love how the puzzle pieces fit. Moreover, I love that John Harbaugh has a little chip on his shoulder after being, I would say, dismissed in Baltimore. I think that comes out and that makes him laser focused on making sure that the Giants play the right way. And with the personnel that they have in total defense, they certainly should be able to get off to a fast start and reappear as a playoff contender by season's end. Let's go to Minnesota because KOC, Kevin O'Connell, gets an opportunity to coach. I'm gonna say this, and I'm kind of being funny, but I'm being real because there's some people that feel like this. Kevin O'Connell gets to coach the greatest high school player to ever put on the pads in Texas high school football history. When he coaches Kyler Murray. That is real. That's legit. And he's going to have an opportunity to take the Vikings to the next level. Kyler Murray joining with a great coach.
Yeah, RG3 was a pretty good one too. The great Rodney Thomas, who has passed away, was a great, not quarterback, but he was a great running back, said Benson. We've had some pretty good ones. Kyler Murray was great. He's an interesting study. Didn't do anything at Texas A&M, transferred to Oklahoma. And we know Oklahoma was the reclamation spot or the building spot for Jalen Hurts and Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, who all came from different schools. We know Kyler's background. We know the history of Kyler, what he can do, what he hasn't been able to do, missing some games. There's questions about how much does he love it? Is he willing to put the work in? We know everything that goes with Kyler Murray. What we also know is that Kyler Murray right now understands that position and is going to be better at that position than J.J. McCarthy. You and I talked about it last week. Let's be real about it. J.J., for as much potential as he may have, Kyler already knows how to get there. He's already there. And so you have a team with a very good wide receiver, one of the best in the league, in Justin Jefferson, and actually a couple really good wide receivers in that building. And you have a good quarterback coaching head coach as well. We know that. I mean, that's the reputation for KOC. What you have here is a chance to get a quarterback who's more ready, much more ready to get the machine started up and get it rolling downhill with the passing game, more so than we've seen with J.J. McCarthy. They need help on defensive line. They added Caleb Banks and Dom Orange. These two rookies, Bucky, are probably going to step into a starting role right off the bat. That's a lot to ask of rookies. But I love the defensive coordinator, obviously. Brian Flores really understands how to put pressure on defenses, and he's I just think he's special in terms of stressing offensive lines. It can't be stressed enough. He understands how to make teams uncomfortable with just through his play calling and just through how he aligns his personnel. And then you look, they've got some holes on defense. There are some question marks on defense for sure. But I think anytime you get a quarterback of Kyler Murray's ability, not that he's always executed, not that he's always been healthy, but his ability, that really helps to unleash Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. And Justin Jefferson really made no bones about the fact that he felt like the quarterback position needed to be better in Minnesota. And I think it will be better with Kyler Murray. And when you look at the roster they have, when you look at the defensive concepts that Flores can dial up, I think you got to have him in the mix for someone who's going to make some noise in that division. Another very, very competitive division. Man, super competitive division.
Yeah, super competitive. And I think the thing about those competitive divisions, people talk about it, iron sharpens iron, and how the first thing that you have to do before you can build a team that can win a Super Bowl is you got to build your team to beat your division. You play those teams 6 times, you got to make sure that your team is able to lock and load and take care of the competition. And the Vikings certainly are that. You talked about the 2 young guys that they brought in, Caleb Banks and Big Citrus, Dominic Orange. What I love about Caleb Banks, if Caleb Banks is healthy, there's no doubt in my mind this guy's a all-pro caliber player. The issue is the health. And normally when you have 300-pound men that have foot problems, it tends to remain a problem. We'll see if he can kind of be the outlier and beat that, because if he can, defensively, man, they have exactly what they need. Brian Flores is a mad scientist, concocting all kinds of different 5- and 6-man pressures to come after the quarterback, and he has the personnel to be able to do that. I will say they got to figure out maybe that one hole. Like, do they need a safety? Do they need to kind of ask Harrison Smith to kind of come back and be the emeritus that can keep everything together? Because defensively, man, they're pretty solid and salty all over. And then offensively, that's where the fun is going to happen. Kevin O'Connell, look, man, I think he probably ate a nice little slice of humble pie, considering how Sam Darnold continued to play great when he went to Seattle. They had their struggles in Minnesota with the young quarterback and the other quarterbacks that came. I think this is actually a good thing for Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell now will be locked in and focused. And here's what I know, man. The quarterback position is loaded with ego, just like being a top offensive play caller has some ego to it. And not from a bad standpoint, but from a selfish standpoint, man, you want to be regarded as the best. I think KOC has done some work in the offseason to make sure he's able to put this offense back on the map and have people talk about him and his play designs and the, we'll say, reclamation project that Kyler Murray is and will be. If those 2 things happen, then the Minnesota Vikings are certainly penciled in to be deep in the tournament, because Kevin O'Connell and Kyler Murray, if they work together successfully, this Minnesota Vikings team is going to win 10, 11, 12 games.
Yeah, another team, moving on to the Washington Commanders. Boy, this is one for me, Bucky, that I look at this as Jayden Daniels. I'm fully expecting Jayden Daniels to get back on track. Last year was a disaster for him. We know what happened. We know the injuries. He just couldn't get it going. He maybe had a little humble pie too, since we're talking about, things came really easy for the offensive rookie of the year in his rookie season. They came very easily for him. And there is something about being humbled that really can reignite a player to find, what he had in the past. Now, that past is obviously just 1 year past. But Terry McLaurin is a top-notch wide receiver. I thought they were going to draft another wide receiver. I thought that was definitely on the board. We didn't see them. Go in that direction other than Antonio Williams. Now, I say Antonio Williams, he's a 3rd-round pick. The reason I like him a lot is kind of a gadget guy. He can throw it if you want him to throw it a little bit. He's 4 for 4 with 2 touchdowns as a passer. So, I mean, pretty efficient with the touchdown throws. But he is very good run after catch. He is good with jet sweeps if you want to use him that way. If you're 3rd and 3 and you throw him a little hitch and you want him to just go get a little wiggle and and break a tackle and get forward for a first down. He can do some of that for you as well. I like what he adds to the offense because to me, he's one of those, he's kind of a hybrid player. He's not really hybrid necessarily in terms of Deebo Samuel, but what he is a player who can win in a few different ways for you. He's not necessarily the master of any one trade, but he is the jack of all trades. And so he has some of that available to him. But this team, in my opinion, is about two things. It's about getting your quarterback healthy and getting him right again. And then it's to see whether or not they were able to tighten up the defense with all the changes they have. I'm looking at the roster right now, and I am seeing 11 new players on the 2 deep. 11 new players. 2 of them came from the draft, Sonny Styles and Josh Josephs. Josephs was a 5th rounder. Sonny Styles, of course, was a 1st rounder, the 7th pick of the draft. But the rest of them, Odafe Owe, Leo Chenal, you've got Caleb on Chason. These are guys with starting experience. Nick Cross came over from Indianapolis. We'll see if he's an upgrade defensively. Meek Robertson got a lot of dog in him, just a real tough guy mentality and highly competitive. So we'll see if just a new group of players can be better than what they had defensively last year. It's got to be better than what they had last year. But how quickly can you get this many new starters, potentially, as I said, 7 new starters potentially on the defensive side of the ball? Is that going to be a plus, or is that going to take time for them to – this is an offensive line play. The continuity things, that's totally different on defense than if you're dealing with an offensive line. But are these the guys that can make enough of a difference defensively? I think they've got it. Looking up and down this roster, I think they're going to make the defense better. But more importantly, I think getting Jayden Daniels back and getting him back to form, which I believe will happen, that is going to be, more than anything else, the thing that is going to give the Washington Commanders the best chance to get into the playoffs. And I think they are a team you got to keep an eye on, despite only winning 5 games last year.
It's funny. You talked about Antonio Williams. I've had wide receiver coaches around the league tell me that he was their favorite wideout at that point of the draft because of what he could do in the slot. Said he's the real deal. Felt like he was slept on. And in Washington, he'll have an opportunity to be a major factor given how Jayden Daniels likes to play. You talked about the Commanders' defense and what they needed. Man, Sonny Styles being there for them so he can replace basically Bobby Wagner. You love that. All the new pieces that they have. To me, it's going to be really simple for the Commanders. Dan Quinn is going to make sure that this team is simple enough on defense that they can allow their athleticism and playmaking ability to just kind of naturally show. Look for it to be a simple Simon defense, not a lot of disguise and trickery, but hey, we're going to play faster, we're going to play more physical than you. And at the end of the day, we're going to whoop you because we have better people and their personnel may give them a shot. Also knowing that they have the magician, the quarterback that can always make it right behind them, and Jayden Daniels. Yeah, the Commanders are a team that you want to keep your eye. And remember this, David Blah, the young new offensive coordinator who is just fresh out the league as a backup player. He takes over. It'd be interesting to see his take and his spin on this offense as they move into a new era with Jayden Daniels.
And a new defensive coordinator, but we know how Durante Jones, but we know obviously that's going to be Quinn's defense. But there's a lot of turnover on that staff. Maybe feeling the heat. Obviously, Dan Quinn was not happy with what he saw at least on the field. We know, and he felt like changes needed to be made. So, he brought in a new defensive coordinator to work underneath him, or work with him in conjunction with him. We know about all the players they brought in. I just mentioned all the defensive talent, 11 different players on the 2 deep. And now you've got a new play caller who's a former quarterback. So you hope that he can really click with Jayden Daniels. A lot of changes over there in Washington. We'll see if bringing back the old Jayden Daniels, who's still very young, and all of the changes he's made to the staff and to the personnel, we'll see if that has an instantly positive effect. I know people don't think it happens. There's an inclination to believe that, well, it takes a while when you get behind the 8 ball. It takes a while. Not really. The NFL's filled with worst to first stories. Like every year there's a worst to first. We had one in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The Patriots. So worst to first happens more than you think.
It happens more than you think. Now, It's time for Hot or Not, brought to you by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. And now we're going to talk about America's team. You're there in Texas. They've always told me, don't mess with Texas. We got to talk about these Dallas Cowboys. And I know it's on a different part of the state. And I know in H-Town, y'all don't really rock with the star. But I got to tell you, man, I am impressed with what the Cowboys have done over the course of the offseason to bring it back. We talk about defensively, Caleb Downs being drafted, Malachi Lawrence giving them some energy off the edge. They got some veterans that have come on board to mix in with what they currently had at the end of the year with Quinnen Williams and those guys. I think about Rashard Gary and what they're able to do with Kenny Clark. I'm feeling the Cowboys. I feel like this is their time to kind of show and prove to people that they're back and back in a major way.
Yeah, I know I'm from Houston, and I take some, we don't really rock with Dallas and vice versa. That's just how it is. So I'm glad you know that. However, I'm also objective when it comes to my football analysis, and I tend to agree with you. I like what Dallas has done up to this point. Defensively, Kobe Durant is the type of competitive, on the ball type of cornerback that you want out there. He's a guy, he's going to make some mistakes. He's not the biggest player, but he also will go out there and try to make plays on the football. You've added Jalen Thompson, I think will be a benefit. You want to get Deron Bland back to playing the type of football he was a couple of years ago. Rashawn Gary, he's never hit double digits in sacks, not 1 year while he's been in the league, but he's been consistent in terms of the way he plays the game and how physical he is. So having him on the field along with Quinnen Williams up there in the front and Kenny Clark, they added Kenny Clark a few years back in the trade. They've got Quinnen Williams via trade. They've added Rashawn Gary. These are some professional defensive linemen. These guys know how to play, and they do the same thing every year. And that should not be, if your front is sound and stable and solid, that should not be diminished because that's a really important building block for a defense. You've added, obviously, the biggest addition to me is Caleb Downs because I think that defense is going to start getting hyped with him. Now, offensively, I'm not worried about the Cowboys. I think they're in a really good place. O-line, they got pass-catching tight end in Jake Ferguson. They've got two really good wide receivers. I think the offensive line is solid. Javonte Williams showed that he was ready to roll. The question, Bucky, was can they get the defense where it needs to be? And honestly, like you talked about, free agent moves and the draft, can you just get the Dallas Cowboy defense to rise to the level of average, to maybe slightly above average? Because if you can, you've got an explosive offense that can carry you potentially a long ways.
You absolutely can. And I'm thinking Brian Schottenheimer certainly learned a lot from his dad. His dad won 200 regular season games in the National Football League. He has a winning pedigree. He has a winning formula. And I think that winning formula is going to show up big time in Big D.
I want to ask you one more. I want to follow up with one more. Christian Parker, new defensive coordinator.
Ooh, love it.
I think he's an interesting. I want to just hop to a kind of a subset. This is what you deal with when you have an ADD person on a podcast. I'm gonna bounce, and I got some caffeine in my system. But Christian Parker, this is how it happens in the NFL. I think this is an awesome story. Started at Virginia State as a DB coach, then went to Norfolk State. So he's at HBCUs there. Then was a defensive analyst in 17 at Notre Dame, defensive analyst at Texas A&M in 18. Then he's quality control, right? So this is, Bucky, this is like
climbing the ranks.
Yes, this is
climbing the ranks.
We're hitting the little pegs on the ladder. It's a slow climb. 2 years as a defensive quality control coach at Green Bay, learning, getting the knowledge. That doesn't pay much if you know anything about QC jobs. But then he gets 3 years as a DB coach in Denver. And Pat Surtain said he was very instrumental in some of the work he did with Pat. Pat's maybe the best corner in the league. Then he was with the Eagles for 2 years as a passing game coordinator and DB coach. Now here he is, his first year as a defensive coordinator, and he's doing it with the Dallas Cowboys. Just kind of cool to see. I'm a coach's son. You have the same background, and you coach right now. Watching a guy come up the ranks, and then you always see a guy will get hot in this business. It can happen in college and go to the pros. It can happen in college and go from a coordinator to a head coaching job. But there's certain guys in the league. It happens every year, every couple of years, where somebody gets hot and they start to shoot up that ladder. So when you put in your work and you do a good job, things like this happen. And for Christian Parker, I think that's really cool watching him climb that ladder, catch fire, get elevated to this job as DC. He's only, how old is he, Buck? He's only 34 years old. So really going to be fun watching a 34-year-old defensive coordinator, seeing how he gels with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, now, so here's the thing about Christian Parker. Everyone wants what Vic Fangio has in terms of that two deep shell, keep everything in front, play with smaller guys in the box from the second level as opposed to kind of really exposing yourself with single high coverage. And when you think about that, and then you think about player development. So he's going to have the schemes and the tactics given his experience with Fangio. Then you think about what he was able to do with Pat Surtain. You think about the young corners in Philadelphia that played well right away. Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, those guys showed up, showed out immediately. He understands how to develop that in the back end. Well, now you've already given him a veteran front that has some guys that can shoulder more responsibilities while he really is working with Caleb Downs and those young guys on the perimeter. To me, as a defensive back taking over the defense, he's going to think from back to front. Hey, let's make sure we don't give up the explosives. Then let's figure out how it has to fit and play up front. Could be the best of both worlds for the Dallas Cowboys as they look to make a move in the postseason. That was this week's Hot or Not segment brought to you by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. Store more and do more with your data. Try them for free at wasabi.com. Got a few more that we want to get to. Hey, I know you hot on this team because you got excited when Reuben Bain was drafted to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tell me, Lance, why you think the Bucs are back this season.
Well, I think Bain is going to be Defensive Rookie of the Year. I haven't locked in officially, but I'm leaning heavily to Reuben Bain. He's just a grown man. You know, I made a comment. I saw him. They had a video, Tampa. I don't know if you saw it, but they were in camp. You know, had not even the pads on, just had the jerseys on, had the helmets on, and he exploded into the sled and lifted it and threw it. And I was just making a point. You know, there's some people saying, "Don't get excited. Why are you getting excited about a drills?" It's not about the drill. It's about a reminder that some guys are built for the NFL. There are some guys that are built for the NFL, and typically powerful, violent, aggressive players succeed in the NFL, especially on the defensive line. I've seen it. I saw it with Marcus Golden, who I thought was going to be kind of an average player. He ended up being an above average player. He ended up, and he took it. I say that my dad was coaching at Arizona at the time. He went to my dad and said, "Hey, is your son Lance Zierlein?" He said, "Yeah." He goes, "His scouting report was terrible on me. Like, he's one of many who have beef with me, lifelong beef, because they didn't like the fact that I said they had weaknesses." But Max Crosby's another. But I'm glad to be wrong on players. But one thing I learned over the years, Bucky, took me just 2 or 3 years to figure out: tough, violent, physical, and strong. That is less likely to bust than an athletic finesse player. And I think Reuben Bain is going to get schooled up and improve some of the his methodology in terms of rushing. I know he's a good run defender. I'm less worried about the short arms with him than I would be about some other players, and I've explained why in the past. I'm not going to get into it here because I do believe arm length is very important in the NFL. I just think he's a bit of an outlier with that because of how he plays and provided he aligns tight to the line. But Bain and Todd Bowles' defense, I think, is going to be really good. I like the addition of Kenneth Gainwell. I think is a smart addition, to add him. Josiah Trotter, I think, can step in and be an early starter. Big shoes to fill, obviously, when you talk about Levante David, but just Josiah Trotter has the ability, I think, to become the next man up. It's not going to happen right away, but I like the addition. And look, it's not the hardest division. That division's up for grabs until Carolina proves that they can keep on building, until the Falcons prove that they can play up to their level of talent. Tyler Shuck has to prove that he didn't have the second year blues. You know, every second year player you have to watch for second year quarterbacks in terms of that. So you lose Levante David, that's going to hurt. You don't have an answer for Mike Evans. I like the addition of Ted Hurst, but let's be real. he's not ready to take over. However, they already have Egbuka, they have Chris Godwin. So it's not like they're devoid of talent. You just need Baker, I think, to play more consistently. And you do need guys like Keontae Scott, the fourth rounder from Miami, who I think is perfect for Todd Bowles' defense. Reuben Bain and Josiah Trotter. I think those three rookies could have a big impact on the defense for the Bucs to go along with what you hope is Baker getting his mojo back, because it kind of went away the second half of the season. But it's a division where it's up for grabs.
It is up for grabs. And the one thing we know about the Buccaneers is they've been able to win the division 4 out of the last 5 years. They've been able to kind of do it in a way that I would say, look, man, it's definitely more force than finesse. And the thing that strikes me about their draft and the people they brought over, when you talk about their first handful of picks in Reuben Bain, Josiah Trotter, Keontae Scott coming over, this was definitely an attitude draft, a draft that will get them back to the identity that has served them well. They are a physical team, and they're at their best when they're violent. Each of those players we talked about on the defense side of the ball are violent. They also are high IQ players that can play in that complex zone blitz pressure scheme that Todd Bowles prefers. To me, this is about making sure that they're able to impose their will on opponents, not only from a mental schematic standpoint, but physically in a very primitive way. We are going to whoop you for 60 minutes, and we're going to be the last one standing. This team kind of reflects and embodies what my man Todd Bowles is all about, particularly because he's a Jersey guy.
Yeah. What about I talked about earlier, really competitive division in the NFC North.
Mm-hmm.
Can the Lions get back there, Bucky? Are the Lions one of those teams? They lost DJ Reader. They lost Graham Glasgow. They added Blake Miller in the first round, Derek Moore, pass rusher out of Michigan in the second round. We know they need a pass rusher opposite Aiden Hutchinson. We knew they needed a tackle to pair up with Penei Sewell. They got that with Blake Miller. What are your thoughts on getting, grabbing a hold of that very competitive division with Dan Campbell and the Lions, making sure they say, hey, that was 1 year. Don't write us off. We're back.
I think this is what it was about. And look, it's not only Dan Campbell. I heard Brett Holmes talk about, like, sometimes you got to get back to who you are, got to get back to the grittiness. And maybe they kind of veered away from that a little bit in some of their personnel moves, but they were hell-bent on getting back to being that type of team. Well, if they're going to do that, they're absolutely going to find a way to win, because the best part of the Lions, and I think sometimes it's lost in a love affair that people have with Ben Johnson from his time there. Make no mistake about the Lions. The Lions were a backyard brawl type squad at their best. And yeah, Jared Goff was throwing it all over the yard, and Amon St. Brown was making plays, and Jameson Williams and those guys. But it was part of a physical approach that really wore people down. I think they have to get back to that. And I think this draft and what they've done in the offseason is about getting back to that, because they certainly were talented enough, underachieved for whatever reason. Some of that is reeling from the loss of a talented offensive coordinator who is now the head coach of your rival. Yeah, Dan Campbell doesn't sit back for long and kind of take those L's. I think they're going to try and get back on track. They're going to try and absolutely bully people to no end when they get back on the field this fall.
You got to remember that Dan Campbell took over play calling duties. So there was some, they didn't, there was an issue with replacing Ben Johnson. There's no doubt about that. They never really quite got it figured out. We will see if that fixes itself this year. I do know this, to get your point, you lose, you're going to have to find, we'll see if Isaiah Pacheco can provide something similar to what David Montgomery was able to provide when the Lions were really had that running game kicking, because Jahmyr Gibbs needs a second back. You don't want Jahmyr Gibbs, having way too many carries. You want the ball in his hands, but you also have to be smart with it because he's so valuable. The question's going to be, how does Penei Sewell work over there on the left side? He's very talented. It's not always a lock that a right can go left or that a left can go right. That's not always a lock. So you have to see, how that looks. My guess is Penei is going to be just fine, but it's not always a lock. But how does that team do on the interior running the football? Is their interior line? Because I think they're still trying to They're still trying to figure out with Frank Ragnow gone and Glenn Glasgow gone, over the last couple of years. Now you got Cade Mays you brought in. Christian Mahogany right now is your starting left guard. He's got to prove himself. Tate Rutledge is in his second year from Georgia. They've got to prove that they're still bullies on the offensive line, that they can move people around. I think Jared Goff is going to be fine. I don't worry about him. And then defensively, you have a lot of talent on that. You have some good, smart players on the defensive side of that, but it would be nice if you could get some rush from the rookie Derek Moore. I think that's going to be really important because, it hurt not having Ben Johnson as your play caller, but what hurts maybe just as much is that he went to a division rival and the Bears look like they're on the come up right.
Oh, for sure.
And the Lions have to reassert themselves this year.
They certainly have to reassert themselves this year. We talk about two competitive divisions, the NFC North. Look, we're just rattling these teams off. The Vikings and Lions kind of vying with the Packers and the Bears to get back into the mix. That'll be interesting. But then the NFC East with the Giants, Cowboys, and Commanders. If you had to press me against it, I would say maybe the Giants ahead of the Cowboys. But I'll bet your money, not my money, on that. So look, that'll do it for this episode. We took care of the NFC. On the next episode, we're going to take care of the AFC and talk about which teams can bounce back from disappointing years to be major factors in the postseason. I'm Bucky Brooks. That's LZ. Until next time, we are out.